Hey everybody, this is Jon Croft from Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and this is Jon Croft. And we have Ryder the Omniscient here. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. It's great to be here.
Good. I can't believe this. This is incredible. My show has like virtually no followers or anything, but I've already interviewed like two guys from Lore TV and a few of my other friends, local friends. And finally we get someone like writer on here to talk about like filmmaking and you know being a creator on YouTube, and but more importantly than that, we get to talk about culture and the impact Christian artists and filmmakers are having on culture. And I just think that's the coolest thing ever because writer, I couldn't help but notice, but you have really astute observations on the faith-based industry, and a lot of people just have no idea. They've been watching entertainment, they've been watching media, they've been part of, maybe they've been Christians their whole lives, they watch faith-based media, but they have no understanding of what's going on. All they know is faith-based film isn't that great. And people like you come along, people like me come along, maybe a few other people that I know of, and are saying, guys, there's a reason things are not that great.
hmm
People aren't paying attention, and like real artists will get this, but a lot of people who aren't artists, maybe they're kind of on the outskirts of the industry, or maybe they're a writer, or maybe they're something, but they're not really like on the pulse of what's going on. And so how did you get so astute on this matter?
Well, it really had to do with, in part with my personal journey, learning how to write, learning how to make movies, being interested in movies, and then also observing like the movies that Christians are known for are not that good,
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be the best out there, like not from like an arrogant attitude, but just like God calls us to be excellent in all the things that we do, and our movies are not excellent. So I'm
Bingo.
like, well, there seems to be a disconnect here. So what's going on? And so really, it just came from my own research and just, talking to Marcus Pittman, listening to
Hmm.
a lot of YouTube videos, podcasts, just trying to gain an understanding of like why are Christian movies the way they are? And so then my video essays are just me kind of sharing what I've learned with everybody else.
Amen. Yeah, I think you have to really put thought into it because you have to put pieces together. You have to piece it together about why the industry is the way it is. And having been in the industry a little bit myself, like in the secular industry, I can tell you, like I can tell a lot of Christians, it's not pretty out there in LA. It's not a pretty, beautiful, glorious, glistening, tinsel town as they call it. It's not beautiful. It's now the ocean is beautiful. Like when you go out to LA, it's beautiful. The weather's great, like all this stuff is great there, but the people are not great. The industry is not great. Like how things are constructed out there, like the kind of scripts they're looking for in Hollywood, all of these things are kind of like, wait a second, are you serious? At first, especially as a Christian, right? You come in and you're like, okay, I kind of expect some of this. We're not morons, like we know that LA is looking for a certain kind of content. But then as you dig into that more, the kind of formulaic nature of everything kind of hits you at a certain point. And then I think for me, after COVID, it just got so much worse
Hmm.
that I was like, okay, well, now I'm understanding there's not just a lot of like hirings and firings that match a certain ideology. No, it's very kind of like a prohibitive for a Christian to do business there any longer because we're always self-censoring. We're always like, apologizing for ourselves, right? We're always like, kind of like censoring the gospel, essentially. And I think that's kind of not how Christian artists ought to be thinking, right?
hmm
And so like you made a short film, I think three short films, two short films.
Yeah, those were, let's see, what that was, those are, I was what, 14 and 15 when I made those. So they're not, my best
Sure.
work right now. I'm actually working on something right now that's in development. And so, because I wanted to be able to, well, this started
Great.
before I started making essays actually. And, wanted to make something, just, put my name on it, put it out there and actually, make something that kind of embodies what I've been talking about in my video essays. And so now it's kind of like I've been talking about it, but now I actually need to make it and, showcase what I've been talking about.
Right.
Otherwise, it's all just talk, right?
Yeah.
And people are gonna, if all I've made are the things when I was 15, right? People are just gonna point to that and be like, what are you talking about? Right?
Yeah.
Of course, that's not all I've been doing. I've been making a lot of stuff since
Good.
then, but it's none, a lot has been published yet.
Hmm.
But this one is it's not a short film, it's actually a series. And
Nice.
so it's going to be episodic. Um, so all that to say though, I'm thinking like a lot of, kind of back to what you're saying about LA and Hollywood and all that. And, a lot of Christians think that movies they have to be Jesus movies in order to be
Right.
different from everybody else and from Hollywood.
Hmm.
But by doing so, they're actually minimizing the gospel, ironically enough, right?
I agree. Yeah.
So they're taking God's moral standards and they're actually putting him in a box, and they're putting
Hmm.
his standards in a box and saying, actually, all the stuff that we see in the Bible, we see a lot of there's like murder, there's some language in there. If you look at, I was just looking at Brian Gatto's book, Hollywood Worldviews. Up the
Yeah.
Apostle Paul actually uses a derogatory term for poop, for
Hmm.
excrement. He uses
Yeah.
that. And so it's like, actually, the Bible is not as black and white as a lot of Christians would like it to be,
Right.
So
Or you can't
I've,
whitewash the gospel and the Bible. You just can't do that. The Bible
yeah.
is meant to be a provocative, kind of life-changing document, and it's going to be real. Like, and it's from
Mhm,
God. So if you believe it's from God, then how can we criticize like the intentionality behind what the Bible is trying to tell us? Obviously, you can criticize it from an artistic perspective. You can criticize it from a historical perspective as it comes to like trying to understand it, because good criticism is really about understanding something. It's not just about taking something apart, right? So it's about understanding something. And I think that's what we as Christians are really supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be understanding what makes our God so great. And that's a form of praise, right? Like this is where science comes from. Science comes from the belief that by studying God's creation, you learn more about God, and this is a form of praise to God, right? That's kind of beautiful when you think about it.
mhm,
And I think art is the same kind of concept. Art is the study of beauty, right? And beauty is really the study of God, because God creates beauty. And so we're trying to understand it. And in doing that, we like you can establish rules to that, like music, there's tons of rules in music. And so the idea that have you discovered this truism right now, which is that people believe art is subjective.
mhm.
And the more you study art, the more you see that's clearly not true. Like art is
Yeah,
very objective. Now, our experience of art is different, right? So this
yeah,
is what people are so caught up in. They're caught up in their experience, like nostalgia. Nostalgia is an experience of art from a different time. And so your experience of art is very subjective, right? Because there's many things you associate with art when you're experiencing it. And so you could have had a really tough day and then you listen to some beautiful art, but then it's like now the art has this bittersweetness to it, right? And so
mm,
that's an experience of art. But the art itself is an objectively good or bad thing, right? That doesn't mean you
mhm.
can't enjoy it, even if it's bad. Like you can enjoy bad art, but like people
Yeah.
have this concept that art is subjective, and it's just not. Like beauty, right? Beauty is the concept we're learning from when we as artists do our craft. And so we're refining our own understanding of God by refining our understanding of beauty and storytelling. So I just think that's powerful.
Mhm. Yeah, there's definitely there's kind of that like the subjective versus objective. Like how do you like I think the subjective, like you were saying, comes a lot. It really comes down to experience.
Hmm.
And kind of the subjective part is like what are your life experiences and how do you interpret this art? But the objective is like one of the comments on my videos was like, God loves our bad movies. He doesn't have our aesthetic preferences. But I'm just like, that's a nonsensical statement because if you
Yeah.
look in like I'm thinking of like how like he instructed the Israelites to make the tabernacle and all these beautiful things. They're using this gold and all this jewelry, and it's obviously pleasing to the eye,
Right.
right? And so, and of course, like the Temple of Solomon, right? It's like this enormous wonderful thing to behold.
Yeah.
And he created all these mounds. And the back when I was still doing school, learning about anatomy, human anatomy, and it's so wonderful and
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So God obviously has high standards of what beauty looks like and what it means. And so to say that God doesn't have our aesthetic preferences, actually, it should be the other way around,
Yes.
right? We should have his aesthetic preferences.
Yeah.
And, I think as artists, we instinctively mirror that in some ways when we're trying to create beautiful music or a beautiful painting or a film or something. We have all this lighting and composition and storytelling, and we're trying to mirror because we're made in the image of God. So we
Yeah.
naturally we we tend to want those things and desire those things and make those things.
Exactly. It's kind of like saying God's understanding of math is wrong. It's like, no, God invented math. God cannot be wrong about math, right? It's us who are learning from God and learning from the rules we just see in the universe. And so we're learning from that or we're not learning from that, right? And so similarly with art, with beauty, we're either learning from these objective concepts what beauty is, or we're kind of like maybe not putting so much importance on it, right? So that means we're not learning as much. But like, nevertheless, the rule still exists, like math. You can't, it doesn't just disappear because we don't like it or whatever. And so similarly to beauty, it's like, there's lots of rules you'll see in art. And so you'll see great storytelling. Like when I write a script, I tend to use the beat sheet, which is Blake Snyder's beat sheet. I just find that it really helps me with structure for my storytelling. I don't see it as I don't necessarily see it as an objective rule, right? Because Blake Snyder is not God, right? So but I see it as something that's really impressed upon me that there's something true here as it comes to like how to tell good, stories through film. And so how does that take shape how does that tend to take shape in scripts? And that's kind of how what I see it tends to take shape in like a good beat sheet. You'll see these beats. And so that's kind of like a structure that I use to help me write a script. Because otherwise it gets kind of chaotic, when you're writing a script.
Yeah. Oh
You're
yeah.
just kind of all over the map with all these ideas. And so if you don't give yourself kind of some structure, a little backbone for your whole thing, then you're gonna just take forever. Like my first script took me a year to write, you know, because I was like trying to be perfect and all this stuff. And I needed more structure to help me to move it along. And so that's kind of what I use. But like there's so many other rules, whether you're in cinematography or sound or writing or what have you. Where do you kind of focus your energy as a filmmaker?
I enjoy the writing process. That's kind of been my, when I was, oh, how old was I? I was about 12 and my first endeavor was trying to write a book,
Awesome.
and so that was kind of my first introduction into telling stories, on paper, right?
Yeah.
Before that, I don't know, it was like the age of 10 to maybe about 15, I was into 3D animation, right? And so
Cool.
that was,
Yeah.
that was kind of, you have to tell stories somehow through that, making your animations and your some sort of story.
Hmm.
But making a book and trying to write something, you have to outline it. And so that was my first introduction of taking these abstract ideas and having to make them more concrete.
Hmm.
And so, um, that sort of turned into when I was about 15. So this is where I'm coming off of 3D animation and I'm learning more about film. And so I started to try and make some short comedy sketches. I entered with some of my friends. We made the short films that are up today. And so those were, it was a Star Wars fan film competition. It was
Yeah,
great.
I
It
love
was
it.
yeah, that was an awesome introduction into film.
Comedy is great because it's actually pretty hard to do good comedy.
Yes, I found that out very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
so then, well, plus, like, as you can probably see with comedy, there's the writing and then there's the performance and then there's the editing, and all of them are very
yeah,
distinct and all of them are necessary to make good comedy.
yeah.
Like,
I
if you miss
think
on one of those three things, you're just like, this didn't work
yeah,
out. I don't know why, you know?
yeah, yeah. But like right, yeah, I found out very quickly. It's like I don't have the I just don't. This comedy isn't quite my thing.
Right.
But I still thought, well, I still enjoy film. I still enjoy writing. So,
Yeah.
I'll try something a little different. And so right now it's just kind of, enjoying like we don't have very much Christian sci-fi or fantasy or
No, yeah.
thrillers. We don't have very much of that,
And it's the
right?
perfect
And
genre for us too. Perfect genre.
yes, it really is. You can
Yeah.
explore so much
Oh,
of
great.
God's standards and just like great storytelling with a thriller or sci-fi
Yep.
or just like all of those
Fantasy.
genres.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're all the expensive genres. So of course I had to pick those ones, right?
Of
But
course. Me too. No, I love that too. That's my favorite as well.
yeah, they're just um also the stakes. I remember in one of the podcasts Marcus was in, a lot of the stakes of sci-fi, it's like having to defend your family. The world is at stake, or you could lose your daughter or your son or your life,
Right.
right? There's a lot. The stakes are way bigger than Christian Hallmark films, which is like, there's a loss of your dog or
Yeah.
or your horse.
Well, the
They're
beauty is you could go as big as you want. Like, you could be talking about the universe, the fate of the universe, or you could be talking about like just your family or your
yeah,
dog, right? You could go as big or as small as you want, and
yeah,
all throughout it. Like, I think it's just about the world building, isn't it? So you're in this other
yeah.
world, and it allows you to leave messages, like to give values and messages in a way that's more appealing to people instead of just being in our same setting, in our same universe. You
Hmm.
can kind of sneak
Yeah.
messages in there that I think are more, that are very relevant, you know.
Yeah, and I love the world building. I love that's my favorite thing about storytelling is, um, the characters are great and everything, but I love making of like the universe that my
Yeah,
characters are in and just making like what's the history, and you can bake so much into that. And then the
totally.
characters are just living it out, right?
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I guess the world building kind of comes from I've always been big into reading fantasy. So that's
Well, yeah.
the love of books. That's something my parents have instilled in me. And
See,
so
there
I've
you
been
go.
big into reading, love reading.
Exactly. I find that people, fellow Christian artists who are into reading, they get a lot of this stuff a lot better. Like, because either you're filling your mind, right, with epic stories from great writers, or you're
Hmm.
filling your mind with like Hollywood junk, right? And so you really can't, you got to have one or the other, in my view. And unless you're like kind of replacing this nonsense from Hollywood with something good, which to me is stuff like C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, like
Mm-hmm.
I think Daily Wire is coming out with a Pendragon Cycle. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I have.
Um, yeah, Pendragon Cycle is like an Arthurian story,
Yeah.
like a reimagining. It's pretty. I think it could be pretty cool. But like stuff like that, I consider to be what the Inklings called mythopia. And so mythopia, have you ever heard of that term?
No, I have not.
It's like a literary genre that they invented, basically, that Tolkien specifically invented because, he's so much into myth, right? Well, Tolkien kind of did something amazing with myth, which is that he kind of created a modern myth at his time. And that's basically what mythopia is. It's a love of myth to such a degree that you can create a modern myth, right, for the modern age, and but you have to be very astutely aware of your myths from the past in order to do that. I would consider the space trilogy also like a Mythopia, even though it's sci-fi. You don't have to be fantasy or like a sword and sandal epic to be Mythopia. You could be, it could be world building of basically any kind, but it's got to be mythical in some way, in that it's like the characters, there's archetypes, right? There's a kind of like a thrust, a plot thrust that is very kind of like intuitively connected to our modern thinking, the zeitgeist of our modern thinking. Like in other words, we understand it and we relate to it.
Mhm.
Um, and so Tolkien started this, basically this genre called Mythopia. I mean, Star Wars is essentially the same thing. Star Wars is a modern myth, right? And so I love these. Like I grew up watching Star Wars, the original Star Wars and stuff like that.
Great
And,
series.
yeah, so you see the modern Star Wars and you're just kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, misses the
Um,
mark.
yeah, it does. But there's other great stuff. Have you ever read the story or the writer George MacDonald?
Sounds familiar. Sounds
Yeah, he's a
familiar.
Scottish writer from the 1800s. And so all of his stuff is public domain, but he does fairy tales. And some of the greatest fairy tale writers were actually inspired by him. In fact, Tolkien and Lewis were both inspired by MacDonald to write. All of his stuff, you can find it online. It's all public domain, like I say. And a lot of it's really powerful, So I consider like fairy tales to be like a great form of mythopia. And, as a fellow Christian filmmaker, you could work on your own scripts, write your own stories, or what you can do is adapt, right, an old, beautiful story from the past and just, like use their writing, right, which is good to make a modern story. I find that that's a good idea too for a lot of filmmakers who aren't writers. But we are, but I think a lot of people, they don't know what to do. No, they don't know what to make. And they could
Mhm.
take an old public domain work that's got values in it and adapt it to a modern film, and it would be great, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that's a possibility for a lot of people out there.
yeah. I think a lot of Christians too are just kind of afraid to put something out there or to make themselves known, or they don't know how
Right.
to put their stuff out there. And so, yeah, like a lot of people that were engaging with my videos, they're like, "I'm glad you put this out here because I've been afraid to
Mhm.
talk about what I do. I've been afraid to talk about my writing
Yeah.
because, they're not secular enough for Hollywood, but they're not, clean enough they're not sterile. They don't have that sterile look,
Hmm.
for the
The
Hallmark,
faith-based
Christian
look.
Hallmark space.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think there's definitely been a confusion in the Christian filming space as to what are God's standards for film, right? And so
Yeah.
they've kind of stuck with this older female demographic
Yep.
that, they're very black and white, just based on the films that we can see. And they're just like no swearing, no cussing, no guns, you
Mm.
know? And
Yeah. Marcus
so,
was
but
talking about
like,
that, wasn't he?
yeah, yeah, he was. And I thought, wow, that's actually so interesting that like, but they're making a decent amount of money off of it, right? Otherwise they
Sure.
wouldn't continue making it. It's kind of similar with Hollywood. They found a very vocal audience that they keep, making movies for. But that audience I would say is relatively small because if you look
Yeah.
at, all of us other Christians, right? If we're just talking about the, Hallmark films and just the church in general.
Hmm.
We all lean toward all of these films like Lord of the Rings, There's some violence in there. There's some themes in there. They're like, you have the Black Riders, which
Yeah.
are they seem like demons. They come off as
Sure.
demons, right? And so then you have you have a lot of different themes in there that are actually, if you look at scripture, scripture has that too. And I think a lot of Christians have been afraid because, like, if it's in movies, then somehow that's different,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the Bible portrays a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, you can point to, there are things in the Bible that point to the occult. Like
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about like the King Saul, when he goes to contact, goes through this witch to contact Samuel,
Yeah.
right? Like there's that's in there. You know, the
Mhm.
Bible has no problem talking about David and Bathsheba's adultery,
Right.
right?
Right.
No problem talking about, I'm thinking in the book of Judges with Yael, driving a stake through the sleeping enemy through his
Yep.
head.
Yep.
That's violent, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, so it's like God has no problem talking about these things, so we shouldn't be either, right?
No, we shouldn't be.
And like if God, the creator of the universe, is doing this, then obviously it's not sinful for him to do it, because otherwise he wouldn't be God and we would have no standards, right?
Yeah.
But the thing he doesn't do, which is makes us different from secular people, is he doesn't go into pornographic detail about David and Bathsheba's adultery.
Right.
You know,
Right.
he doesn't go into like the Saw movies with like all this gratuitous gore. He doesn't do that either.
Right.
But he talks about it. He's like, this is what happened. This is
Yeah.
history. You
Yeah.
know, you need to know this. But he
Mhm.
doesn't go into gratuitous detail, which I
Right.
think for Christians, that's like when it comes to a moral standard, you know, that's what differentiates us in terms of what we can show and what we
Yeah.
can speak about,
Because
right?
there's a
And
point to the story, right? There's a point to talking about all these things. God is saying we have a choice if we choose these bad things, right? This is kind of where horror was, I think, in the 80s and 90s when initially the horror explosion at that time with the slasher film
Mhm.
was really not just about this evil guy, right? It was about the fact that these kids or these victims were doing bad things. And so it was a cautionary tale. Hey, don't do these bad things because if you do, like if you go like in the woods and do bad things, right, you'll get killed by this guy. And
Yeah.
so that there's a connection there, an association there that's meant to be there. It's purposeful. And of course, then a lot of these filmmakers just grab onto this genre, that this formula, and then they miss the point of it, and then they just make a bunch of gratuitous stuff. But what made those
Mhm.
films great was the point of all of that stuff. Like it was actually meant to be a morality tale.
Yeah. And I think yeah, I think like Christians definitely need to take back the horror genre as well,
Yeah,
because it's been it's been dirtied and it's gotten
absolutely.
filthy. I'm thinking like a movie like Hereditary,
Oh
where it's
yeah.
just I've heard from quite a few people, it's like you walk away from that film, you feel gross,
Yeah.
you feel disgusting, like it's just a nasty film, and I'm never gonna watch it. But like if you're watching the trailer, even watching the trailer, you're like, this is messed up,
Yeah.
you know? And so we need to, as Christians, we need to not be afraid to go to some of these darker places, but
Hmm.
because that's like the darkness is a part of the whole truth, and we can't forsake all of the truth.
Yeah.
Because to tell a half truth is to tell a complete lie,
Hmm.
right? So you're telling a lie, really. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
we need to like, because there are some things in the Bible that are quite horrifying, right? And so
Absolutely.
if we can take all these techniques of storytelling like suspense and fear, and we can use them for the glory of God, then that we're building the kingdom of God. That's really the
Yeah.
whole point of all of this. But we're not going to build the kingdom of God if we are, afraid to touch everything in film with a 10-foot pole. We're not going to go near
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
right? Because then who else is going to take it over? Like if we're not doing it, someone else is going to do it. And they're
Yes.
not
And
going to
they
be in
ha and
line
they
with God.
have, and they're doing it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, we've
Yeah.
given up our like you said it yourself that God is the master storyteller. And so the fact that we are not learning from him really says something. And it's I do think I agree with you totally that it's kind of shameful. And I feel bad, right, for my fellow believers who have put money into these films, put all their effort, into making these films and then buy the streaming service and all this stuff so they feel like they're doing something good, by doing that. And the reality is I don't think they're doing anything good. I think it's actually very sad that they're supporting kind of like I guess you could call it a dumbing down. I don't want to be rude about it, but it's like this is these aren't real, in my view, real artists. Like it's not really artistry because filmmaking is much more than just the artists. It's the money men, it's the investors, right? It's the craftsmen who are kind of like working on their singular craft. And so all of these people are involved, and some of those people are going to be in charge, and some of them are not. And so you've got a few artists, sure, that they're there, but they're not necessarily in charge of finalizing the script, right? Of like doing all the final edits in the film, you know? And what you're going to have instead is money men who are thinking of the marketing and thinking of all these other things. And so these are the decision makers quite often in Hollywood and in faith-based film who are really deciding what sells, right? And what's going to get them their money back.
Mhm.
And I think, I mean, that's what I see is really happening. And so if you're one of these people, then like you're a Christian and you want to like do something good in entertainment, instead of supporting one of these streamers or one of these companies who are making very formulaic faith-based film, I think it's better to do something like going with Lore TV or do something like even Angel Studios, because Angel, even though they're run by Mormons, like even though they're putting out good faith-based, like at least better quality faith-based content, and they're shaking
Mhm.
up Hollywood because they are kicking out stuff in theaters that's from Hollywood, and they're taking that space instead. And like they did really well in Sound of Freedom.
Oh yeah.
They've done well with some of their other films. Did you see His Only Son, which
No.
came right before Sound of Freedom in the theaters? And I was like, wow, this is actually really good. It's creative. It's about Abraham and Isaac, right? And so Abraham sacrificing his son, and that story is really
Yeah.
important to the Christian story, and it's told really well. Um, but Angel's not perfect. They've made a few things here and there that I wasn't impressed with, including Sight. I didn't really like Sight that much. Um, but a lot of their stuff I really enjoyed, but especially Sound of Freedom. And the
Oh
reason
yeah.
is because it has a message that's powerful and Hollywood can't stand. That makes me
Yeah.
like it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I love that film as well. It was so good. Um, and it's like, I guess that's for a lot of people too. That's a topic that is it's very tough to hear about, but it's also like the protection. Like for me, like I've always looked forward to being a father one day. And so when I see a film like this, where it's like the protection of children and, getting like the, revenge on the evil men that are
Yeah,
doing all these horrible things, that's like, yes, like I want to see
absolutely.
something like that, right? And I'm sure, other parents out there, like my parents thought it was an amazing film,
Yeah.
right? Because like it has a good message, but it's also story focused, right?
Yep.
And so neither sacrifice the other. And I think Christians have thought like we need to focus on the message while the secular people are focusing on story, and it doesn't
Hmm.
really work like that.
No,
And
it
so
doesn't. You can have
no,
both.
you can have both. And that's exactly what God does, and that's what this film does. This film marries both of those perfectly. And even though, it was made by a Mormon studio, I thought that it had a pretty Christian message actually.
It did.
Because it doesn't matter what religion it is,
Right.
God's moral standards permeate everything because we're
Mm.
made in his image and
Mm.
he's given us a conscience, right?
Amen.
And so, there may be, different religions and different worldviews may twist those things somewhat. But even if you're looking at, this Mormon studio, they can't help but they're trying to tell a good story. And to do that, they have to borrow God's principles,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I just thought, wow, that is an amazing film. We need to make more like it.
Yeah.
So to be bold too.
And a lot of people that I think repudiate Angel and don't want to support Angel, they might not understand how big the film industry is and how it works. Angel is essentially the marketing and distribution arm. They don't make these films. So what they're doing is trying to get filmmakers who make good stuff that gets approved by the guild. And if the guild says this film amplifies light, then they're going to go, okay, we're going to do this. They didn't make that torch, you know? And so when they get a product that's made completely by Christians and the guild says, I like this, they're not going to go, well, yeah, but we're Mormons. We're going to shut this down. No, in fact, I think Mormons like a lot of Christian storytelling because they consider their story to be, and not to get into the intricacies of what Mormons believe, but like they kind of believe that their story is runs kind of parallel to ours as Christians in some ways. So, you don't have to get into that too far to understand that they have no issue with an authentic Christian story. They believe that they have some ownership in that story as well. So it's not like there's some kind of like guy behind the curtain going, I'm gonna make sure this is a Mormon story. No, if you learn more about the Harmon brothers and Angel and their history, you'll see that they actually have a bone to pick with Hollywood. So they have every personal interest to kind of like change Hollywood from the outside, which is actually what they're trying to do, which matches up with what we want.
Yeah.
So we can both be what you could call foxhole friends. Foxhole friend is someone you fight alongside, for a common goal. And so when you go through that traumatic battle on the front lines with somebody, you're going to become friends with them. It doesn't mean you're going to like believe everything they believe, but it does mean that you're going to fight faithfully along with them on a common, with a common mission.
Hmm.
And so I think that we have a common mission there. And but I do prefer something like lore, right? Because at
Yeah.
least they have a lot of things right, I think, with their philosophy. They haven't gone as far, right? But I think that's because they started later and they have a little bit of a different model, you
Hmm.
know. So why don't we talk about lore a little bit? Because even though, we don't work for lore and we don't get none of this is, you know, sponsored by lore or anything like that. We're just honest um fans, I think, of lore. And as filmmakers, I think we can kind of like look at what lore offers and say, maybe we should make projects for lore. I don't know. What do you think?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think the like being able to the put some responsibility back into the hands of the viewer. And, instead of being like, okay, we're in charge of all the movies that we're going to make, but Laura's like, what do you guys want to watch? Like, genuinely, what do you guys want? What do you
Yeah,
want to watch? And
yeah,
so you can use the money that you're paying us to actually fund those things that you want to see. And I
right.
think that's a great concept. And that, a lot of indie filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers like myself who are just getting started, that's a very attractive thing to be able to go to where the audience is and be like, would you want to see this? And if they're
Yeah.
like, yes, then it's all in, right? Instead of being censored. And, I think lore definitely provides a place where there isn't this a crap load of random, meaningless censorship where it's like, we just
Hmm.
don't like your message for no reason,
Right.
right? Or, you didn't have enough diversity,
Yeah.
right?
Or some silly thing. I agree. Yeah, I think that Laura has a good attitude about incubating good projects, and about how artists work. I think that they understand that artists need to feel free to kind of explore ideas. And then, kind of like how crowdfunding works, right? The artist kind of presents an idea, and then the crowd, comes in and says, "Yes, I like that," or "No, I don't like that," right? And so similarly to Angel, you want to have a lot of investors or and fans who will say, I will give so much and so much to this project. And then you get to make what you wanted in the beginning. And if it doesn't get a lot of support, right, then offer another project that you think
Mhm.
your fans or that this kind of fan base Lord is building is going to approve of, you know? And so it's kind of like getting to know Lore's fans, which is a lot of the reason I like Lore. Like I was saying, I prefer Lore over Angel, right? Because I think I'd be more familiar with what a Lore fan wants as opposed to with what an Angel fan wants. Angel, I don't know, they could be all over the map with their theology or whatever, but Lore, at least I know that they have a similar kind of sensibility. I do. And so if I offer something that's maybe for men, for example, or is has great plots and or maybe it's a little scary or something, I know that lore people won't be against that, for example. But
Yeah.
angel people might not be a fan of that. But also, I think Angel's standards have been going up and up and up, right? Because now they're talking about millions and millions of dollars in these films, and Laura is still kind of like trying to get indie filmmakers to kind of buy in, and that, the quality might not be there yet, but I'm fine with that. Maybe my quality is not there either. So it kind of creates an opportunity for people who are new filmmakers to say, I don't feel the need to be perfect, right? What I can do is just kind of explore myself as an artist and a filmmaker and try to do the best I can. And if the people at Laura like it, then that's good. I'm able to step up and get better and better. But if I like try to go to like right straight to Hollywood, right, I'm gonna kind of be disappointed, or go straight to Angel. I might be like, I might feel bad because I'm like, well, am I really a filmmaker? Like, it
Am I
takes
good
time.
enough?
Yeah, am I good enough? Like, it can take a lot of time and energy and resources to kind of craft, to improve your craft, you know? And it's one of
Mhm.
the things that we haven't always been aware of as Christians or conservatives, right? We're not always as kind of like, I guess, a lot of people aren't caring about culture as much, I find, in the church. And they're not really caring about like how to improve their craft. They're just kind of like, you hire some guy from your church to make your faith-based film with you, and they've never made a film before. It's like they're not thinking about the fact that the arts take it's a craft. It takes time to like refine that craft and get really good at it.
Mhm.
And if you're just hiring people off the street or in your church or for your friends or family, it's probably not going to be that good, frankly, you know. Starting out, that's great. That's fine. That's what you should be doing starting out. But like eventually, right, you want your craft to get better and better. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I look at my old stuff, I kind of cringe.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm
Oh yeah.
like, you know,
What
and
was I
there's stuff,
thinking?
yeah, well, like, why did I do that? But I don't know if you've like I actually have a channel called Trithia Film. And it used to be Liberty Number Five Pictures. And I've got like two of my short movies up there, and now I look at them and I'm just like, oh, these aren't that good. You could watch them if you want. One of them is called Death Do Its Part, and it's like a zombie film, like a zombie
Oh, cool.
romance film. It's so weird. Okay, and then the other one is called Golden Foot, and it's just a comedy that's like weird and zany, but it's kind of boring. I'm like, you know. And so I'm like you, I'm like, I'm working on something new. I have to make something that's more what I think is more close to who I really am as an artist. So it's like you're kind of discovering yourself as an artist, and it takes time to do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It takes time to hone that craft.
Yeah.
Um, like I play piano. I've been playing piano for what, 5-ish years. And it takes, if you want to get to the most difficult pieces and if you want to be the best, you have to put in the time and the effort,
Yep.
right? when I first started playing, I just went to the most difficult thing I could think of. And,
Good job.
yeah, yeah, that was my introduction.
Gut punched.
But yeah, but like, it's kind of like you need to take that time, you can't just jump, head first into the most difficult thing, right?
Yep.
It takes time to be able to hone that craft and to get good at it and get to that level where you can create these beautiful things that a lot more people will enjoy. And I think with lore and with their process of, like if the viewer doesn't like it, it's not going to happen. And so that weeds out a lot of bad filmmakers
Yeah,
or
it does.
just not even like, maybe the quality's not there 100%, but it's a great story and that's what the viewers want,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And so that's gonna take off a lot of people right off the bat.
absolutely. And it takes so much time too. Like a lot of people just give up. I've met a lot of filmmakers who, they started out with like high hopes, and because either it takes too long or it's too expensive or they don't have the discipline, they just kind of drop off like flies like a year later. And instead, I think it really takes patience and it really takes a love of filmmaking. Like when I worked on my first feature film, which I was like a script supervisor for this film that was done locally in Tampa Bay area. And when I did that film, a lot of people were like, I hate film after this. It was like 2 months of like hell, 2 or 3 months of hell. And I was like, this is awesome. Because you have all you film is like it's like a grinder. Like it's just like when you make a feature film, I don't know if you've worked on a feature film yet, but it'll grind you to powder, man. Like like because you're doing 14, 16-hour days. You're working sometimes six, maybe even all 7 days a week for like 3 weeks, maybe even a month. I mean, it's very difficult. And then you have, because of all that stress and you're tired and everybody's, so worn out, there's arguments. Like people will argue about nonsense, like, and then of course you have the artists' interests versus the money people, and all this stuff comes out of people. And so you have to kind of like, it's a difficult slog through film, especially during production. And so it'll weed out people pretty quickly, you
Mhm.
know. But so if you're not like made for it, it's like I don't know if I'm a film person anymore. I thought I was, like when I went to college, I was studying law, and I just went through a year of pre-law undergrad, and I was like, I like the subject, but I know after I've met people, after I've talked to people, I know I couldn't do this as a career. It just would not, it's not interesting to me anymore. Like, and it's just all about money and all this stuff. It's not about like actually doing good in the world necessarily. And in other words, it's going to be the wrong kind of stress for me. I would rather
Mhm.
have the kind of stress you get on a film set. And that took me years later before I realized that, because I had to experience a lot of stuff. And I was in music as well. By the way, I was doing songwriting and singing and stuff.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
that was like 5 years of like trying to go through bands um and try to make a good band. And people just don't have the love or discipline for it. And I didn't either. I thought I did. And so it was one of those things where I had to go, like, I just don't have the discipline for this. And I didn't meet a lot, like I didn't also meet a lot of the right people, I think. But then years later, I'm in film and I'm like, I think this feels right. Like it's more down the alley of what I wanted to do with storytelling, right? Um, I was like trying to write songs that had storytelling in them, like cool stuff like that. And um eventually I kept doing that, right? And then later I'm like, wait, I can do film? Like I didn't believe I could do it. Because, back in the day, we didn't have all this cheap equipment we have now. And so every bit of equipment was super expensive. I mean, I just didn't believe I could do it. I thought it was like a like a fun thing for rich people to do, basically, is make film. Um, and later I just like, I didn't realize I could do this, you know? So it really felt kind of exciting. But of course, the problem is now you need the right script and you have to, you're working with a bunch of other people. And if you don't have the right people with you, right, it's going to be hard to make that film. So it really
Mhm.
becomes about community. Can you find the right community to help you make films? And if we're not as Christians in Hollywood where there is a community, where are we going to find that community? Like,
Mhm.
have you thought about that?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that? The lack of community we have.
Yeah, I think definitely finding like-minded people such as you and
Hmm.
I haven't found very many, right?
Yeah.
Um, however, I was lucky enough to I don't remember how the connection was made. I think, I don't know, my mom knew somebody who knew somebody, but I ended up having a summer internship at this Christian ministry where they're trying to do kind of what we're talking about. They're trying to make films that are a little more outside the box, right? And
Awesome.
so actually the guy that I was working for, we are in the process of writing a feature film right now.
Sweet.
So yeah, so to be able to have those kinds of connections it's so important. And if I ever needed something and I'm like, hey, I'm making this such and such short film, it's like, do you know somebody that would do this? He'd probably be like, yeah, I can, I can make some calls or, to be able to have, some really cool connections. It's so important. But
It is.
yeah, I was fortunate enough while I was doing school to, have my mom, she happened to know somebody, right? But to go out, I think you just kind of have to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Like with my videos, it's kind of I'm putting myself out there with all the stuff that I'm talking about, and it's
Hmm.
kind of like if you want to contact me, go here. And I've
Right.
had some people
Right.
contact me with like, would you want to do a collaboration? Would you want to look at my script? Would you XYZ? And so I think it takes a lot of effort. It takes
Yeah.
some time, but you got to put yourself out there. And I think um, it's kind of like you gotta hone the skills to be able to do that,
Hmm.
and also, I mean, I don't know, that's something I'm trying to learn myself, right? So I
Yeah.
don't have a complete concrete answer, but at least to me, it seems a lot of like learning the skills of, how to market yourself. Because, um, my mom, she's a business owner and she does a lot of marketing. And she's like, if you want to be able to make money at what you do, you need to know how to market. You need to know how to write good copy. You need to know how to sell yourself, basically, and sell your art,
Nice. Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I think that's definitely part of the equation.
Hmm.
But also to have good art and be able to put your art out in a place where people can see it. And yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, I think, but
Yeah.
you got to do some digging. You got to go look for those connections
Right.
because people aren't just gonna usually they won't just stumble across you. I was fortunate enough to have that kind of happen to me,
Yeah.
but outside of that, I don't know how I would know anybody, right?
Yeah. And I think, like, well, you reached out to me too. I really appreciate that. And so, like I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm not always a fan of marketing, but I've had to do that. And I actually had to start like dip my toe into it and started a website called Media Moses, where
Yes.
it's about like Christian work out there. Like what I'm trying to do is at least start something that's like the Hollywood trades.
Mhm.
And that's an ambitious goal. But, if you just start with trying to do copy, like you were saying, your mom does marketing, writing copy is surprisingly hard. Like you'd think it's easy at first because it's so like sometimes it's very short and succinct to the point, right? But it can be surprisingly hard. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to learn that skill essentially. And why not start a website to help with that? And so I started MediaMoses.com, and it's a way for Christians to find like good art. and talk about stuff that's not Hollywood.
Yeah.
So, if you want art that's like good, you want a star, like the Hollywood star system is totally like gross now. It
Yeah.
used to be like, it used to be like there was Hollywood stars that you could kind of admire. It used to be like, I don't know, John Wayne or somebody, back in the day,
Hmm.
Clint Eastwood or somebody. I don't know. But like, I mean, it's so long ago now. But now it's like, I think we even have this so much of a dislike for Hollywood as Christians in many ways that we don't even believe that stars could exist. Like, we don't even think that you could have someone to admire. But that's absurd as a Christian. Just having a father, right? As fathers, we're supposed to be kind of like someone our children can look up to. And so I have 3 kids. That's my desire, right? Is to give them someone to look up to. And that means not disappoint them, right? When they're looking for some kind of guide and some kind of teaching or some kind of direction to go in is number one, don't do what the world does. Don't be like the world. Be like someone like Moses or like a patriarch who's like a guide for them, like to lead them to God. And so to me, my understanding of the kind of star system that we should have is patriarchy, is like a guide that someone can look up to, someone who you wouldn't mind following into a desert, like Moses, right? You're like, you know what? I can follow this guy. I know God is with him, right? And if we have stars like that, they don't have to be perfect people. Moses was not perfect. In fact, that's kind of like where the story starts. Moses is obviously an imperfect guy, and it takes time for the Israelites to put their trust in him, right? Because he's not a perfect guy. So, but doesn't God want them to follow Moses? Of course he does.
Hmm.
So we have that same duty, I think, as Christians and in the church too. Sadly, I think our churches have been very feminized, and so you don't have a lot of great
Yeah.
father figures in the church, even from pastors. You know, there's stories now of like people like I have an episode on my podcast of David Platt, and so there's these different pastors who are like kind of like betraying the trust of their um of their church. And it's kind of sad that our modern church, we don't have, we're not creating people we can put trust in and faith in.
Hmm.
And instead we are kind of like, I I don't know if we're getting lost in ideology, some kind of political ideology, but it's like we're no longer like following biblical standards of what a patriarch should be like, or even just a good father should be like. These are the kind of heroes we need to see in films, right? And then when we
Absolutely.
see the actor afterwards talking about their film, like maybe they're doing some kind of press junket, I want to see that actor have some standards. I want to see them be struggling, maybe even struggling in their faith. I don't mind, but somebody who is somebody you can believe in. And, you wouldn't put all of your faith in a human being, right? That's kind of absurd unless he's Christ.
Yeah.
But what you would do is go, you know what? There's something I can learn from this guy, you know? Like people like Jim Caviezel, right? Who did Passion of the Christ, did Sound of
Yeah.
Freedom. These people, I think you can go like, that guy's pretty cool, man. Like he
Hmm.
knows what
Yeah.
he's talking about, you know? So this gives people hope. And I think that's the kind of star system we need in the Christian film industry to kind of like provide. It's not even boys, right? But it's everybody to provide something to follow in when you're going out into the wilderness of life, right? And you don't know where you're going, where you're going to get water next. You know what I mean? Like it's like the Exodus story. And so I think that we have to provide some kind of hope as artists for people who are lost out there. They don't know what we're doing as a church or as a people. They don't know where to go next, and so they need heroes to believe in. That sure, it could be a biblical story, or it could be like you were talking about, like a sci-fi or fantasy or even a horror film, right?
Hmm.
Because there's always the guy who
Yeah.
survives in the end. Could be the final girl or whatever you want to call them. But they're the people who kind of like you have hope in. And they're somehow different, don't you think? The final girl is somehow different. I don't know if you know about that trope. The
Yeah.
final girl who
Yeah.
survives in the end, right? She's in a way an example of the church. She's blameless, right? And
Right. She didn't do the naughty stuff.
she doesn't do the naughty stuff. Exactly. And she keeps herself clean from that. And she also doesn't seem to judge others. I found that to be true, like a common thread in horror film is the final girl doesn't tend to judge people. And so all they're really trying to do is survive, but then eventually in the story, they end up giving their life for others, right? And that's what helps them to survive, actually. Um, which of course draws you to the story of Christ. And that paradoxically, in the Christian story, it's the heroes who give their own lives that actually survive in the end. You know,
Yeah.
I love that trope. I just think it's great.
Yeah. And I find horror interesting too, because like so few Christians, I know one person that I have talked to who has a podcast as well. He's talked to somebody on his podcast who he's a Christian, he does horror,
Hmm.
but it's not very often you hear of that, right? So when I
Yeah,
heard that, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And also rare. Like how often do you hear of that?
right.
Right? And I think, I mean, it's not even just with horror. If you're thinking about like romance, action, drama, so much has been taken over by Hollywood or just people who don't like Christians, they hate God, and they, you know, there's a lot of people coming out of the woodworks recently. I'm just thinking like evil used to like I was listening to Mark Driscoll actually. He was saying like evil and Satan, they used to be under covers, a lot of under wraps,
Yeah,
a lot of that. And now it's just like boom. Yeah, we're trying to groom children.
yeah.
Great.
It's like
Like
Satanism just in your
it's just right
face.
in it's in your face.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so that has only happened because the church hasn't been doing their job.
yeah,
And in my video essay, I said something that might make people mad, but I was like, the church has normalized pornography. And the reason that is, it's not necessarily because we support it, because we don't, right? But
no,
it's because we haven't been actively fighting against it, right?
exactly.
And it's the same with film. There is so much sex and graphic gore and violence in film because we as Christians have been like, I'm not going to touch it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go there, you
yeah,
know? And so instead, we have all of this feminine Christian content that has nothing controversial in it, has no guns, there aren't any
yeah.
stakes.
It's
Um,
boring.
and
Yeah.
it's boring. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we learn the wrong lesson from it. It's like they do all these crazy things and then we're like, "Oh, I'm never going to do any good storytelling. I don't want to do that." Like, no, you just missed the point. Yes, they happen to have
Yeah.
good storytelling also, but like at least learn to use your discernment to say, well, this is the part of their story that wasn't good, and this is the part
Mm.
that was good. And if we're not doing that, like obviously we're not going to be able to make good films because it really takes people with discernment to make good films.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly. And as Christians, I know like a lot of these people that lean more toward the Hallmark stuff, they like that stuff because they're trying to be righteous, and
Right.
they're trying to maintain like a thick line between us and everybody else.
Hmm.
Um, but in so doing, they're sacrificing good storytelling. And, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's like just because there's one thing in this film that like, maybe they had something that had a little nudity in it, but the overarching story it was good, right? And it's a great theme. I'm thinking like the Book of Eli. It has a lot of
Yeah.
swearing in it, but it's a fantastic message. It's a fantastic film, great acting, great story. But we don't need to be like, that movie's horrible because it has some swearing in it.
Right.
We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater,
Yeah.
right? Because
Well, I
this
mean,
is a sinful world.
obviously, if you were in the situation that the guy from Book of Eli was in, you'd probably be swearing too.
Yeah,
Pretty,
yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
tough living there, you know?
Yeah. And I think also it's like the Bible isn't afraid that God in his word, he isn't afraid of showing some of the sinful things. And so in movies, we can actually take that principle and we can mirror that, right?
Yeah.
Because like real life, it's dirty, it can be gross. There's violence, there's all of these things. And so we need to be not we need to be courageous, actually. We need to be fearless
Mm.
instead of fearful of what people might think. And we need to show
Amen.
not like gratuitous, like showing stuff. I think Sound of Freedom, actually, great
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
because they were able to showcase something that is horrific, but in a way that isn't disgusting and doesn't leave you feeling gross. When I left that theater, I was like, that's a great film, and I'm angry. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So, it leaves you with something. It leaves an impression on you that's like, I want to change something, right? Or I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of the main character and try and, fix this problem. Or,
Yeah.
a good movie puts you in the mind of the character and makes you feel what he's feeling. That's not how you know you've done a good job, is when the character's angry and you're angry too,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And it's like they provided a light of hope, right? So that people can say, you know what, I can make a difference too. I don't have to become exactly this guy, but I can maybe get involved to be part of an anti-human trafficking organization or something. Like there's something you can do about it. And like for me, having kids, like I only like my kids are still fairly young. Um, but when I had a daughter, I started doing research on this stuff because I was like, there's this thing I heard about, blah, blah, blah. And so as soon as I started doing research on human trafficking, I was like, oh my goodness, like it's like under our noses. And it
Mhm.
also feels like people don't like I've met other parents now who send their kids to school and with a cell phone and all this stuff. And I'm like, guys, like I don't want to get angry, but I'm like, you guys know that your daughter can be, you know, easily, like starting to go like the more you let your children have a cell phone and like
Yeah.
have that like exposure to the internet, the more vulnerable they are.
Oh man. Thinking like on that topic, there was a statistic I saw. I believe actually Covenant Eyes has some statistics like this, but it's like 9 out of 10 men watch porn. But
Wow.
also the scary thing is women are following. It's 5 out of 10 women.
Wow.
Like if you see 10 women on the street, five of them watch porn at some point. Like maybe it's not that often, maybe it's once a month, or but they watch it,
It is shocking.
consistently. And that is like, what? And
Yeah.
but it's because the church has sacrificed so much ground because
Mhm.
they didn't want to touch something, and they've been afraid, like as the church, that's like our responsibility. It's not just like, this pastor, it's their fault. It's like us as the church, we have failed,
Yeah.
right? And that is not a comforting thought.
Uh,
And film specifically, we have sacrificed so much ground.
that kind of brings up the question of community again, because
Yeah.
I wonder, have you ever thought about moving to the States to make films, or does that community exist where you are?
Well, in Canada, if it's like, okay, one of the main things is like guns, and I'm like, I want to make a movie with guns, but I have to jump through all these hoops. And like
Right.
I have to have a license, I have to have like it can't be a fake gun, and it has to be in the middle of nowhere so that people don't get confused or frightened. And it's like that just stifles creativity, man.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, in the US, like you can pick up an airsoft gun that looks like the real thing, no problem. You can go shoot in
No
your
problem. Yeah.
office. You can shoot a film in your office. It's great. So
Well, out the
and then
west, out west, out, in the States, people just guns on their shoulder, like they're going
yeah,
hunting or they're doing whatever. It's
yeah,
not like a problem. And the evidence is that the crime does isn't a problem when people have the freedom to do that, but
right,
you need a government that's like they care about evidence. If they don't care about
yeah,
evidence, they're just trying to scare everybody. Oh my goodness. Then yeah, that's a
right,
problem.
right. So you're
But
getting rid of the guns for
mhm.
the lawful citizen, but the criminals don't care. They're just going to buy it in the black market.
Why would
They
they
still
care?
get guns.
Yeah,
So
they don't even read the laws.
no, No, they don't care. So yeah, that's a whole rabbit trail. But it's like
It is.
I definitely find like in terms of creative freedom, the US has a lot of that. There's a
Yeah.
lot of creative freedom. And in some places like Canada where I'm at, there's some hoops you have to jump through. Like if I wanted
Hmm.
an action thriller with like guns in it, then I have to do all these things, you know,
Yeah.
just to make sure that I can actually shoot a film with no problems.
Well,
And
you're close to Vancouver, I'm guessing, but like
yes.
if you go just across the border in Spokane, I'm from Florida, so it's like I've never been there, but I love film, so I study film. But like there was a film shot in Spokane, I believe it was like 2014 or something, a while ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, with Thomas Jane called Give 'Em Hell, Malone. And it's totally shot in Spokane, Washington, and it's so gory. Like they're using guns like some kind of, I don't know, like Keanu Reeves uses it in
Oh yeah.
John Wick, like
Yeah.
gun kata or whatever they call it. But it's totally like a film noirish film, right? So it's supposed to mimic a film noir, but it's like gunfights that are just like crazy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
very creative, by the way. So that's, as a filmmaker, it's a good reason to study because even though it's a little gory, it's very creative. But they made all of that film in Spokane. And so there's good people, there's good filmmakers around here. Like you'll just find them every now and then, especially out west. Not as many here in Florida because I've worked with a few and they're not as technically capable because that takes some technical skill.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of ways you can do it with guns. You have the airsoft, but you don't have necessarily blanks and the live rounds, right? So that's one level. And then you have the live rounds where it's like a real flash, but obviously there's no danger of anything happening. And then you have like the full on, like as crazy as you want to get. But like, yeah, there's a lot like who knows, maybe in Idaho, you know, we could make a Western or something. Who knows? Because
Mhm.
that's a genre. I think that's a beautiful genre. I mean,
Yeah.
you could do a lot with a Western as it comes to talking about life, because Westerns are kind of like about law and order, about living a good
Yeah.
life. Like, what is that about? And so I don't know. There's something beautiful about Westerns and that teach about life, especially from a male perspective,
Yeah.
because we have to deal with the concept of like, what do you do if a criminal gets the upper hand in like a small town in the middle of nowhere, and you're just like a dude, right? And now you have to deal with this criminal who's like lording over everybody else. The point is, are you gonna do something about it or not? And what are you gonna do? Like if there's
Yeah.
no lawman to help you, well, you have to become the law. And so like you have a lot of existential questions now about how can I be the law? I'm just a dude, right? And so you have to have a connection with God in some way, right? So you're not just doing what everybody's telling you to do anymore. Like as a man, you have to deal with the idea that sometimes you have to take the law into your own hands. And how are we going to do that? You know? And so feminism doesn't answer these questions. It can't answer these questions because this is not mostly what women think about. It's not that they can't
Mhm.
at all, like as women, but feminism itself doesn't and can't do that because it continues to kind of like look at men's issues like they aren't important, right? Or that they're evil somehow, right?
Yeah.
Like like what are these latest terms they use for men now that they don't like? There's always some new term of like that they
Oh man. I don't know. Uh Bigoted.
I get, yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
like
pick your pick, right?
there's so many. I think when it comes to film as well, there's like the church has leaned all the way into the feminine
Yeah.
when it comes to films. But we need the masculine too. And it's like you need both, because the feminine is a lot about the emotions, it's about the inner turmoil, the character inside character journey. But
Right.
then the masculine is all about action. It's about protection. You gotta, take the action. You gotta do something. You gotta
Yeah.
can't be passive, but without either, I was like, with feminine and like if it's only the feminine, you get God's Not Dead, where it's just only the cheesy
Yeah.
rom-coms that are just like it's leaning all the way into that, right?
It's so
Like those
dramatic. Like
films,
it's too
yeah.
dramatic.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's like some of those films, they have their place, but if it's all that you're making, like
Yeah.
you're just wiping out, you're wiping out all the masculine. You're wiping out like a good 50%
Hmm.
of your audience, right? So you gotta have both. But then if you're leaning all the way into the masculine, and there's like no, like you get no character arc, no emotions, no motivation. It's just
Yeah.
action, you know.
That's not
Um,
great either.
that's
Yeah.
not great either. No. Then you get films that have, I mean, like either way you put it, they're one without the other, there's no stakes.
Right.
There's no true character arc. There's no action, nothing. Without the masculine, nothing happens.
Right.
It's just a stale story. It's
It's a
just
lot of
stagnant.
emotional reaction to what's happening around
Yeah,
you.
it's all the characters are in their heads,
Yeah.
right? But
Yep.
nothing happens. But if it's all in the masculine, then you don't have the character transformation. So you
And
need
as you
both.
know, the rule of filmmaking, right? Show, don't tell,
Exactly.
literally is almost an anti-feminist statement by itself. It's you have to have action. You can't have just talky, right? You got to have a lot of
Yeah.
action in order to show, don't tell.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just kind of how it works. So you
Yeah.
have to, you're right. A lot of it, you need both because one is the external, one is the internal. So to have a whole human being, in a way, you have to have the internal and the external. But it gets really boring, right? Especially as a film when you're not, especially when you don't have the external. You need to have the
Right.
external in there.
Yeah. I think it's okay that some films lean more to one than the other.
Sure.
It's just it makes it more interesting. Some films, thinking John Wick definitely leans more into the masculine,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And then you get films, Sound of Freedom is a little more balanced, right?
Yes.
I would have liked a little more action, but
Exactly.
that's
Yeah,
just
me too.
that's just me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Watching John Wick has raised the standards for action.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think
But
they just had this little action scene in the ending, and I was just kind of like, that was a small little scene. Like, I want to have more action. It's like they're
yeah,
building
yeah,
you up for more action, and then they're just like a little bit, you know.
yeah. That's the one thing I would nitpick on is like I would have liked a little more of that gunfighting action. Just it would
Absolutely.
just been so epic. It's
Yes.
like John Wick saving kids from human trafficking, dude.
Gotta have some
What more?
action.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's definitely there's this as the Christian artist, there's this um you have to wrestle with your kind of these things, like which direction
Yeah.
are you gonna go and how do you
Right.
keep things relatively balanced? Maybe you lean more to one than the other for the
Mhm.
purposes of the story, but you can't forsake all the masculine or all the feminine because then
Right.
you get lopsided films.
And if anything, right now we need a backlash, right? So we got to have a little bit of a backlash that gets attention that says, "Hey guys, we're here for you too." Right? Like it's not just for the girls. Like we want some Christian, and this is what I think Sound of Freedom did to some degree. It was saying, guess what, guys? This is a film for the guys as well, not just the girls. I think that's why they made so much money. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I think that's why it made money because it was marketed like maybe a little bit of an action movie and a lot of, with a good heart, and people came out for that reason. And the funny thing is in Hollywood, whenever a film does well, there's going to be producers going, why are we doing that? I want to make $100 million.
Sound of
Like,
Freedom Part Two.
exactly. So that's the job of producers to look at a success and say, hey, anybody got a script like Sound of Freedom? Like, let's make it. And the fact that that's not happening is kind of disturbing because any normal industry would do that. Any normal industry would look at something that's a success and say, let's make Sound of Freedom 2, or something like it because I also want to make some of that money, right? That would at least be normal.
Mhm.
Obviously,
Yeah.
we as Christian artists, we don't think about the money as much. Like we think about the purpose. Like we would make Sound of Freedom for the the deep inner value of like caring for children, right? Understanding though too that we have to tell a good story.
Mhm.
And the producers who are in the industry and want to make money, like I can understand why they're doing that, but why aren't they at least showing up and being like, let's make another film like this?
Yeah.
That's kind of disturbing to me. Like
Yeah.
we need to be doing better in that area, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like you need both. It's both and, as my
Yep.
pastor likes to say. You need I think money and making a profit is a good incentive to, make a good movie. Like
Mhm.
in business, you need to make a good product to be able to be profitable. You have to serve the customer,
Yep.
right? And so that's kind of what films are. You have to serve the audience and be like, what would they like? What would they want to watch?
Yeah.
Rather than what would I want to watch. Although I guess in part of this, it's like as the artist, you're going to do that anyway, which is natural.
Sure.
That's fine. But you have to tell, I think, especially since there's such a big gap in the market for Christians, and it's like Hollywood is they're
Hmm.
leaving it wide open for people to just enter in, like not just
I
Christians, but
know.
just good storytelling. It's
Yeah.
like you can come right on in, and you can make bank,
Yep.
right? It's like, and you're going to, because people are craving good stories.
Hmm.
And so
I
there's
think so too.
definitely,
Yeah.
it's both. So you want to be able to make some money on your film so you can, pay for the expenses and maybe, make a little extra or a lot extra,
Hmm.
which would be good because then you can make more films and you can keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
But you also need to prioritize the story. And I think with Marcus Pittman, he was saying he worked for the ad company that did PureFlix's ads,
Yeah.
and they were doing everything purely based on math and data. Yeah,
Yeah. You were saying that. I think in your last video, which I loved your last video, by the way.
thank you.
Uh, had no idea it was going to be so like hour and a half. Like you did a lot of research, man. I admire that. That's pretty great. But you're right.
Yeah,
He said it's all based on the numbers, and so therefore you'd think that they would care about like at least care about the numbers and care about the profits enough to be like, oh, well, we're leaving money on the table here that's for men. But
yeah,
no, like my theory, even different, a little bit different than Marcus, my theory is that a lot of this in Hollywood actually is an agenda. It's not
yeah,
actually based on great numbers. Hollywood has never been that female oriented of an industry. There's a lot of industries that are, right? There's a lot of stuff, like, like beauty or care or something. Like that's a
yeah,
female driven industry. Fashion, right? Very female driven. Cinema tends to be male driven, right?
yeah,
Uh, we don't know why that is. Some people have speculated it's the visual aspect of cinema, that men just tend to be very spatial and visual. Obviously, there's people who will get offended just by this discussion because they think men and women are the same, blah, 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 whatever.
yeah,
This is nonsense. Like we've all done this research years ago, right?
yeah,
That and cinema was driven. There's a reason that they fashioned it for men and boys for decades, you know?
yeah.
And
Like
so
all the classic Westerns and everything.
mhm,
I grew up
exactly.
watching Westerns.
Hollywood ignored all this data because of an agenda. It wasn't
Yeah,
because they were trying to make money. If you'll notice these days, like people are still stuck on the idea that like from 10 or 20 years ago that Hollywood's all about money. Before that it was all about the art and the craft. And then it was, well, it's a money decision, right? Like, okay, I can understand that. Like you want to make your money back. It's a very risk averse industry. Now I don't think anybody could say that anymore. You
no,
get these
yeah,
companies and they are happy to lose money in the theater, blockbuster films. They're happy to lose millions of dollars because of an agenda. And this
right.
part of this agenda is the female market. They want the female market. They want the force to be female, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
they they want it to be. It's not. They want it to be though. And so if they can continue to like fudge the numbers and continue to make claims, right? Then you'll just buy it, you know. And if you have anything to say against their agenda, then they'll call you bad names.
Yeah.
But this has nothing to do with the art or the craft or the money or anything like that. Nothing to do with any of that. And so I think as Christians, obviously we want truth to be told, but also just as artists and as people who can be good businessmen, we should look at the facts. The facts are if you focus your film on men and boys, you'll make more money. That's just
Yeah. Because
that's
then
what
the
the
women will
evidence
go with the
shows.
men who are going to the theaters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I know it's like whenever my dad goes to the theaters, and he's like, okay, it's a family thing, right? We're all going, right? But like if it's my mom, then it's usually a girls' night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the whole family.
Because
And I
we're
think
just not we're just not
yeah,
that interested, you know?
yeah, but also like you were saying, I think Hollywood definitely has an agenda. It's plain, it's for everybody to see.
It really is.
And I think there's especially I can see now, especially I would say with like COVID happening and just like
Mm-hmm.
all that craziness, all the guys are coming out of the woodworks and they've really become vocal and obvious.
Yeah.
Like targeting children specifically. Like I'm
Mm.
thinking like what was it, The Rise of Skywalker, one of the recent, films in the past 5 years. And there's a lesbian kiss at the end of the movie. There's like little sneaky, like for a split second. It's barely
Yeah.
noticeable, but it's in
Yeah.
there. And you can see it. And it's like, this is supposed to be for kids. Why is that in there?
Right.
Why is that there? Right.
Because
And
that's
then
their agenda. They want kids to see this stuff
yeah,
because they want to normalize that.
yeah.
And they've
And I'm
actually said
thinking,
that. They've actually said that.
yeah, who's it? One of the
One of the
one of the
Disney
top
people.
executives.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Disney. She was like, yeah, we're marketing LGBTQ stuff
Yep.
to the kids. Just
Not
said it.
they called a not so secret gay agenda. That's
Yes, I remember seeing
yeah.
that when that news came out, and it was like, okay, they're really going after it.
Yep.
Right? They're out in the
They're
open. They're
pressing
for
into
everybody
it.
to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are seeing this and they're like, what is this? This is garbage. We
It
need
is.
better films. And like what kind of films are the kids going to watch too? I remember there were a few films actually that were coming out by Disney that the trailers looked amazing,
Mm-hmm.
but then the movie came out and it's garbage.
Yep.
Right? I'm thinking Lightyear, which is about Buzz Lightyear from
Oh.
Toy Story. And I was like, I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, it looks pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out and there's like a lesbian couple, and there's also Strange World, another animation.
Oh, that
One
was
of the main
almost silly.
characters,
Yeah.
he is the main character. He's like queer, doesn't know what he is. Maybe he's a monkey. I don't know what he identifies as,
Yeah.
but he's something. I don't know. It's a mystery. But there's an openly gay relationship in that film, and
Yeah.
kids are watching this and they're thinking it's okay. That's what these people at Disney
Right.
want. They want kids. They're grooming kids. That's what they're doing,
They want the
you know?
ambiguity of those, yeah,
Yeah, they're
those
blurring the
characters.
moral standards. They're
Right.
like, maybe it is okay.
Right.
And I think I'm releasing another video this Friday. It's about Jack Black, his new film,
Oh, yeah, the
Dear
satanic
Santa.
thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
Dear Santa. And it's it's like maybe Satan is actually a cool dude, you know? And it's like I mean Jack Black, he's funny and all, but that's just
Sure.
too far. That is too far. And
It's so obnoxious and ridiculous. Like just to not even
yeah.
do 5 minutes of research about what Satanists believe. That's like it
No,
takes 5 minutes of research.
but they're gamifying it too. They're like, I'm gonna give you three wishes. Oh, and I'm taking your soul. Ah, funny. Like
Yeah.
it and kids are watching, they're gonna watch
It's
that.
so
And there
bad.
is
Like, yeah, it's just bad for the thinking. It's just not good thinking. It makes no sense. And clearly this is an agenda. Like there's just no
yes.
really way around that. But what we need is just a concerted effort, I think, on our part to make a difference in the culture. So like
Mhm.
I talk about, as you know, like, well, I think you've seen my podcast a little bit,
Yeah.
cultural warfare. I kind of I kind of like use that term like to talk against the quote the culture war because in my belief, the problem is that we've politicized everything instead of just focusing on what good culture really is. Like a
Yeah.
good culture doesn't have to do with politics. It has to do with good storytelling. Like good, like, and so I also draw people to the story of Moses in the Exodus because that was God teaching us how to make a new culture. And so like
Right.
we have to remind ourselves that we, first of all, we can make good culture. God teaches us how to. And second of all, how do we do that? We have to participate in actually making good culture. And that actually has to do with
Yeah.
us making good art and then critiquing it, like talking about it, having a discussion about it, and then like continuing to spread what we think is the art that expresses our values well, instead of art that's just
Hmm.
whatever. And so this takes
Yeah.
good curation too, and like this is why I'm glad that what you're doing is talking about good film because not just as filmmakers, right? But we can also be good curators for other people,
Hmm.
and kind of give an inside view on how film is made, why it's made the way it is. And so I'm glad you're doing both because both of those jobs are really important to culture.
Yeah.
And I hope at some point to talk about how we can be better curators as well.
Yes.
I call it the shepherd's staff, but basically it's like it's meant to be a replacement for something like Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's supposed to be a platform or replacement for that that's based more on values rather than based on just like what makes me feel good or something,
Yeah.
because modern curation is really about what makes you feel good. And that's has nothing to do with culture or the values in culture, right? So, and also like we tend to be like as Christians and then Christian audiences, we tend to like shoot ourselves in the foot because what we do is we're super critical of our own stuff. And then we're like okay with Netflix and okay with Disney and all this stuff. Makes
Right.
zero
So yeah,
sense.
it's a
We
double
should be,
standard.
yeah, we should be super critical of the world and say, well, that's not coming in here for our kids to see for a reason. And then, like with our own filmmakers, we should say, I like what you did. I'm glad you made it. Maybe you could tweak it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like kind of like your brother, your sibling, someone in your family. You're obviously you're going to be critical, right? You're going to like give advice, but you're not going to be like, get out, get hence. I will never watch your film ever. You're kicked out of the family. Like we're not going to do that. That's terrible. So like we would treat our family well. And so we want to congratulate our filmmakers, our artists for making the stuff that they're making and then give them some advice. Like
Yeah.
I like this or I don't like that, but somebody did like it and somebody got some value out of it. And that's good, you know? Instead, we're just like crazy about our own filmmakers. We're like, oh, I can't believe this guy would ever make a film. He's the worst. And then if it's like Netflix makes something terrible like Satanic, then we're like, sure, let's watch it and talk about it. Like, what?
Yeah. Or
Doesn't
not,
make
or
any
ignore
sense,
it.
you know? And it's another
Yeah.
reason that Media Moses is out there because with Media Moses, I thought we don't talk enough about our own stuff. Like we talk about what Hollywood's doing all the time. Why are we doing that? Like instead, we should talk about what we make and then give advice and be like, we can improve this. But at least what we're doing is kind of like throwing some money towards our filmmakers because it's giving them attention, right? And then maybe someone will watch their film and throw them some money. And that way we're kind of supporting our own community by doing that. And then being like Hollywood, whatever. Like we don't need to talk about Hollywood, you know, because yeah, sure, Hollywood can make some good stuff. Like because obviously they have the great filmmakers and artists there. But why would we give them support when all their values are junk? Like, you know,
Yeah.
so like we need to like throw some support to our filmmakers, even though they're not perfect. And then we need to
Hmm.
just, I think we need to mostly ignore Hollywood instead of buying any of their product. I think we should just, it's kind of like the human trafficking problem, right? It's like
Yeah.
as soon as you get a little bit of education on it, you're like, why would I even give my kid a cell phone? Like I wouldn't even give them a cell phone. So it's like just tell people to not buy Netflix. Like don't even buy it. Like, why even give them a chance? You're giving them money to make junk. Why would we
Yeah.
do that? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, that's the hard thing too with this. Is like all the good movies are on those platforms. So you kind of have to be like, it's like, I don't know, go buy CDs or something. That's what I'm honestly like,
Yeah.
they're able to take away films anytime they want. It's like, you want to watch this movie? Too bad. Don't have it anymore. So
Yep.
it's like we should go back to when we had CDs and that was more popular. Just then you can own
Absolutely.
something, right? So that's, then you own it and, you don't have to pay, more
They
and more.
can't
It's
take
kind
it
of,
from
I'm
you.
thinking like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like a gym membership, you end up paying more than if you just bought a home gym and
Right.
just a one-time fee, right?
Yeah.
So, but
It's
I think
true.
like, yeah, well, I think like you said, to support our own filmmakers and the ones who want to make a difference and the ones who have the talent, but then also call out what, Disney, Netflix, Hollywood, what they're doing and being able to like, hey, this movie, this is not cool. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, because like we haven't really been opposing too much. There hasn't been too much opposition from our side,
Exactly.
right? There've been some vocal people like I'm thinking, like Apologia Studios, Mark Driscoll. There's
Yeah.
been and there are some people out there, but
Mhm.
Christians as a whole, we're just kind of sitting here just not really doing much, you know. But we need
Yeah.
to
It's
be
a
able
shame.
to speak about it.
It's like you were talking about Christians basically validating pornography because we're not standing up
Mm,
against it. It's like we're a silent partner in that way, right? It's like
right,
you don't have to um you don't have to say yes in order to support something. You just don't say no to it,
right.
and so we're kind of like shamefully our culture has been taught to like not speak up against all these evils and so like now we've got this huge problem in the culture.
Hmm.
But I also think about like, I just say no to Netflix and all these other streamers, and now I'm working on making good film. Like I want to make good film, and that's what I spend my time doing. And then, like you say, I would just buy DVDs for my kids and stuff like that. And that's plenty. I mean, there's so much content anyway. It's like you don't need to like have all these streamers with unlimited terrible stuff.
Yeah.
No,
So you're
just buy
putting
a
your
few
money toward
DVDs.
that.
Yeah, if you just buy one DVD a month or something, you'll have a huge collection in no time.
Yeah.
You know, there's plenty of options out there. We don't need a ton of entertainment anyway. What did they used to do back in the day for entertainment? Goodness, you know, you'd have to go to someone's house and play piano for them.
Yeah.
You'd be the
Yeah. The good old
entertainment for the
days.
evening. Yeah,
I am the entertainment. Fear
that's
me.
right.
No.
You are. Ryder the entertainment instead of the
That sounds
omniscient.
ominous.
It does.
Oh, I've had some people in the comments, they're like, the fact that you have omniscient in your name, it's blasphemous. Why are
It
you like
offends
that?
me.
It offends me. Yeah. And it's like, it's sarcasm. It's sarcasm, bro.
It's just a name. Yeah,
It's
it's
not
a
meant to
cool
be taken
sounding name.
seriously. Yeah.
Right.
I remember coming up with that when I was like 15, back when I was using Skype, and I was like, what's something that kind of sounds funny? Because I was like, oh yeah, Ryder the Omniscient. So I'm kind of poking fun at myself because I'm not omniscient. Only God is, right? But I don't know. Sometimes that just goes over people's heads, and it's
Yeah.
just I don't know. It's kind of funny, but
It's the internet. Like don't take things
it
too
is.
seriously.
Yeah, and that's one thing too, is like if you're gonna post the kind of stuff that we're doing, you gotta have some thick skin because there are gonna be people that are, oh man, they're gonna be after you. They're gonna be, seething in the comments.
Oh yes.
Just, oh yeah,
I'm
there's a
sure we'll
ton
have
of,
plenty. We'll have
oh
plenty.
yeah. I look forward to reading them. Yeah,
You
but
know
then
what we
it's
should
it's
do? We should like analyze some content together sometime.
oh yes, absolutely.
We could watch something or maybe talk about it.
Yeah, do a live
Uh
stream.
that would be awesome, man.
Yeah. Well, I've
We'll
been
have to
thinking
build. It'll
about
take
that
time to
too.
build, but like I just hope that we can make a difference. People like us, we need to like make a difference on these platforms, you know. Well,
Yeah.
brother, I really thank you for reaching out and for agreeing to do this. And we're gonna have to do this more. Um, but love what you're doing, and I can't wait to see your next project. And I'm so excited that you're doing this, you're working on this new project, and that it's horror, and I'm sure it's gonna be just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and if you need anything, like let me know, email me, and we'll talk about it. Um, and we can have more of these conversations too. I could always talk to you
Hmm.
about some of my film experience anytime. And
Hmm. Absolutely.
it's great, man. Well, love you and your
Yeah.
work and appreciate what you're doing. And we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm so glad that we could have this conversation. It's a much needed conversation.
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, thank you so much. And we'll do this again.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So, everybody, you can find Ryder the Omniscient on YouTube. Is there any other place where people can find you?
No, that's like the main thing. That's where I do all my stuff. I do have an Instagram where I do music, but that's not all the
Cool.
video essay stuff. But yeah.
Awesome. We'll talk about that sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, bro. We'll talk. And thank you so much. And we'll talk later.
All right. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.